Welcome to the place. This is the place for intellectual, spiritual, and scriptural honesty. I'm not convinced that we're there yet, but we're attempting to get there. Tonight we have on several people. We have Joey Livingston to my right.
I just want to say hello to all my fans out there.
Wow, that's nice. That's nice.
It's a special occasion for me to appear in the evenings.
Also, we have back with us Michael Fulford. And we have Bob Graves on tonight.
Greetings. Good to be here.
And we also have our resident atheist and biologist, Greg Bray.
Greetings, to steal Bob's line.
Honey, we've had an amazing week this week, and it's been interesting. Lots of people are excited, very excited about the subjects that we've been talking about. We've been talking about how Jesus was murdered, and yet at the same time people are very, very upset in a sense, simply because we say that Jesus was murdered rather than just crucified. And so that's the discussion tonight that we want to have. What are your thoughts?
Well, I hate to make light of it with this analogy, but this is what it seems like to me. When I was probably, I want to say 8 or 9 years old, okay, believe it or not, I still believed in the tooth fairy. And during the middle of the night, I had a loose tooth, and I kept fooling with it, and finally I pulled it out. And then what to do? You put it under your pillow. So I did. Well, the next morning, it was still there. And then my 9-year-old mind thought, it's still there because my parents didn't know about it. So if they would have known about my tooth, they would have snuck in and put the dollar or whatever underneath my pillow. And as a child, when you stop believing in, Santa Claus or the Easter Bunny or something like that, it's a crushing thing. And I don't want to, put those on equal playing fields, but to a child, it is something like that. And to a Christian, to find out that the person that you have, bought the farm with, and you placed everything on it, hedged all your bets on Jesus Christ atoning for your sins so you're secured a place in heaven.
Which the church encourages you to do, to place everything, your whole life, everything, every decision you make, every thought you have, every value that you hold upon the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, as told by the King James.
Right. And then when you, even as an adult, when you come to find that out, it is earth-shattering. And for some, it's more earth-shattering than others. And so we have to be very patient and kind and treat people that are just coming into this knowledge as somebody, maybe they just found out they were adopted or something. You know what I'm saying? It's that of a magnitude that is going to affect everything in their life. So I do understand how they can feel so depressed is a good word, and incredulous.
Which is why I think that, and this is something that I often forget, but I think that we as the New Covenant group can be more effective as a persistent, gentle voice rather than sometimes, which we sometimes are. I think there's value in it, but I think overall it's better to be a consistent, gentle voice than an aggressive, forceful shout. I think you can, as you say, if I were to holler at my daughter, the tooth fairy doesn't exist. I don't know. She would probably accept it, but I think it might do some permanent damage.
That's true.
Greg, I want to bring you into the conversation. How did you react the first time that you heard me or anyone else say that Jesus was crucified? That is, he was murdered, not to become a sacrifice for sins, but simply because some people were upset at his theology / his life.
Well, I don't know if I'm the best case for that because I sort of came to that conclusion on my own. It was not really earth-shattering to me at all to hear somebody else say it, because it occurred to me when I was pretty young that, I'd heard stories in the news of people being killed for their religion. I mean, everybody's heard of the Crusades, but it still happens today, the Inquisition, the blasphemy laws, that the beheadings that happen in the Middle East or in the Islamic sections of Africa are really a pretty strong example of martyrdom still being alive and well in the world today. And when I hear the story of Jesus, that's always just what it brought up in my mind, is that he was killed for questioning the religious authority, and that's what all of these other people are killed for, even again continuing to today.
Greg, will you stipulate that there was, in fact, an historical Jesus?
I won't make that stipulation with such certainty. I will not stipulate that there was not, in fact, an historical Jesus. I will say that it's certainly possible and rather probable, but that's the thing with history, is it's very difficult to be certain beyond just a matter of degree on nearly anything, and in a very different way than I would use that same terminology to talk about the epistemology of science today, which still has only a degree of certainty, but a much, much, much higher one. So I can't say that Jesus absolutely was a real person. I've seen compelling arguments on either side, but I'll say regardless of whether there really was a Jesus or not, there really are these stories about this Jesus character, and these stories do have a message behind them, and there's value to that message.
You almost had him, Amy. That's nice. That was a nice try. Fist bump.
And blow up. Nice.
We're going to have fun tonight. Let me pursue this a little bit further with you, Greg. When you started hearing theists say that Jesus didn't die for our sins, how do most atheists react to that, if you can give us that?
That, I think, well, we need to qualify, and it's not just theists. Christians making that statement is a pretty revolutionary thing from the experience of most atheists and most Christians. Somebody walking in with the average, or sort of a representative selection even of Christendom in the United States or in most of the world, is going to get the one core message from basically every Christian denomination and sect, is the ransom sacrifice, the atonement, the resurrection, or the things that all come through that, the sacrifice being for saving us from our sins. And to hear that there are Christians that look at that and don't see it the same way, I have to say was a pretty shocking thing for me to even wrap my head around somebody, or how somebody can identify as a Christian when not taking what I've always considered to be the central tenet of Christianity. It's almost like being, I don't know, it's like being a scientist that believes in a young Earth. It's just, it
that
seems
strange?
odd.
Maybe a better analogy would fit.
It's the opposite. It's more
Right.
of an antonym sort of analogy, but it's, I think, a very strong case or a very strong connection in that respect, that it is that starkly different from what a
you
normal
take,
person would expect.
Greg, you take the Christians that have what would be, in your opinion, a more rational view of the stories of Christ by comparison, and you compare them to scientists who believe in creationism?
Yes, in that respect, but again, I'm comparing it in an opposite stance. This is a antithesis of that
Right,
example.
because when you
So,
compare two
yes.
things, that you're trying to find antithesis.
Right. Well, it was not a perfect analogy. I'm on the spot here, okay? I didn't have this prepared. It worked, and I made it work because that's what you can do when you're making up the story as you go along, which is the argument that I always make about apologetics as well.
What if none of us, that is, none of the theists on this show, are trying to defend anything? Does that bother you?
Well, I'd hope that there's a few things that you'd like to defend, but
I'm talking about theologically speaking.
well, I'd argue that that's not entirely true. I think that I've always had a little bit of difficulty getting you to commit to a position, but I think that you would defend to an extent that there is a God, and that this God loves us, and this God cares for us. This God is a form of ultimate love, or the form of ultimate love. And I think that those are good messages as far as things that I've heard in the theological realm, but they're still theology or theological positions, and they're things that you would probably rather actively defend if I were to start challenging them directly.
But isn't there
Don't you- if I could say something to that.
Go for it, Bob.
I think that there'd be a difference between defending the reasonableness of having a conclusion and defending that conclusion as incontrovertible. I would want to. I would even be willing to defend the reasonableness that an atheist has in rejecting the notion of God. If that notion was considered something that I don't see how an intelligent human being can even think that. I would want to defend that as the kind of a thing that an intelligent person could understand. And I think there are many beliefs that I have that I would want to defend them as reasonable, plausible, maybe even very useful. But but I would never want to defend them to the point of making them some form of force, or where I was seeking to compel this upon somebody. That's something I wouldn't really want to do, because to me, and the reason isn't because, well, I'm just trying to be nice, is that I don't think that kind of a faith has any value. My faith is not something that I feel is forced upon me, and I don't want anybody to force it upon me. And if somebody's going to think similar to the way I do, they need to do that because that's what's making sense to them, period. It's just useless to do otherwise. And so there's a sense in which, we can defend the reasonableness of something, but to defend it as if it's being, let everything that can be attacked if it can be genuinely attacked, even if the attack doesn't hold.
The problem there, Bob, though, is that if there's a good and a sincere belief that a person holds, that they're holding due to what they feel is compelling reasons, then it follows logically that that person should be compelled to spread that message when they see somebody who doesn't believe. I mean, I am an atheist because
that doesn't make sense
I believe
to me,
that
really
there
doesn't.
is.
No,
I mean, I didn't come by my beliefs except through a process of my own personal history. How can anybody else come to their beliefs except through a process of their personal history? So, I don't see that connection personally. If I see a person, sometimes from a pastoral standpoint, I might be talking with somebody who's struggling with an issue, and I might share with them a way of thinking about it that they might find useful. If they find it useful,
faith,
that's
though,
wonderful.
As if it's the way you speak of faith, it sounds as though it's a personal taste or a value, things that are completely subjective and unquestionable in that sense, that they're just not within the realm of that which is based on something compelling. So I think
you sometimes perceive faith as a form of inept fact, and I think it's something of an other axis. They are reasonable risks over unknowns that require some sort of a decision to be made, and a person is willing to take the risk.
That is not the common usage that the church would take for the meaning of faith,
right.
but it is a valid usage. It's not one that's uncommon. Businessmen used faith in that sense all the time. They come to conclusions based on probabilities, and they take a leap that they think that they'll land correctly on, but they don't know all the facts necessarily, nor do they know with 100% assurity that what they're going to that what they're trying to do is going to be achieved.
Right. Due diligence, and then it's time to make a decision. Let's go for it.
Michael, let's bring you into the conversation. How, and the atheist, correct?
Right.
Are you reacting to theists who are willing to discuss the death of Christ as simply a murder rather than a sacrifice that takes care of all of the sins of all of mankind and takes you to sweet heaven?
Well, unlike Greg, I'm actually not that surprised. I don't want to say I work with the atheist community, but I do follow a lot of stuff that comes out of it. And
You're not surprised that theists are stating these things?
No. I know of many different forms of Christianity myself. Just when I was searching at one point, trying to find one that was compatible with my own beliefs, and I just didn't find one at the time. But I also am aware of Christian deists who believe Jesus was just a man, who had a good philosophy. Thomas Jefferson kind of fits into that category if you want to take a kind of famous historical example. In fact, if you get a chance to read the Jeffersonian Bible, it's online, complete scan of the original, which is really neat. For me, as someone who has a historical hobby, I kind of like that.
Also, the book of, I think, Kells is finally online.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's look it up.
I love internet and all that stuff.
Yeah.
The Book
But,
of Kells.
It's finally online.
Isn't that a movie?
Make me look smart because I don't know a whole lot.
Oh,
what
I
it's
feel
about.
dumb.
I just
because-
know it's online now.
Because when I hear the Book of
I read
Kells,
some
that's
of
a
it.
Oh,
Or
cool.
I looked at some of it. It's
I'll
very-
probably download it then
Yeah.
when I get the chance.
It's pretty big.
But I'm also aware of Christian atheists who are atheists but believe that the moral teachings of Christ are worthy and follow them. So I know there's a wide diversity in Christian theology that's out there. And so I've experienced many different types. And since I usually try to hold as many discussions as possible with religious people, I've met people who kind of believe the same thing. Jesus may not have been, excuse me, the Son of God, but he was inspired by God or had some way of coming about how he did, and that he offended the people who were in power at the time, and that's why he died. And I do believe that there probably was a Jesus core. In other words, there was probably a core figure that Jesus developed around. Of course, he wasn't named Jesus. It was their version of Joshua at the time. There were a lot of preachers at the time who wandered that area, who were doomsday preachers, which in a lot of ways Jesus was, who did come up against authority, and some were punished, some were not, some got away. So I can, from someone who enjoys mythology and history, I can see that the characters that were historical giving rise to a later mythological Jesus in that respect. It would explain why you have some instances where they, I should have written this down, that you have a statement about Jesus that contradicts some later information that you get later on in the New Testament or in other books of the Bible about Jesus, because you could have multiple different characters who inspired this myth that were kind of brought together into this final myth that we know as the modern Jesus.
You know, I think that proving the historical accuracy or existence of Jesus Christ is no doubt a challenging task. It's not one that I can undertake, but I really appreciate the position of saying that whether there was or there wasn't, there's a story, there's a character, and he represents an ideal, and it's a good ideal. Throwing out some of the ideas that have snuck in, such as hell, etc. But Greg, I noticed tonight you sort of take that position that you can't really say for sure whether there was or there wasn't a Jesus Christ, but there is a story, there is a message that the name Jesus Christ represents that message of something that was revolutionary during its time, a message of love, etc. This isn't a position though that you have always taken. Is that true?
It's, I guess, similar to a position I've always taken. I've always, at least as long as I've been aware of the message of Jesus, I guess there was points of relative ignorance, particularly compared to what I know now, but the message of Jesus seemed to be always, in my reading and my understanding of it, a message of love, loving thy neighbor, as thyself, and turning the other cheek. He's a pacifist hippie, and I like that. I identify a lot with that. And I think it's a very progressive viewpoint versus the very legalistic things or worldview that he was coming into and born into. I think that not everything that Jesus said was necessarily the best it could have been, and some of his actions were a bit questionable, like drowning the herd of pigs was weird, and killing the fig tree seemed unnecessary.
Coming from a family of farmers, I can appreciate that.
Other than that, though, the things he says and the things he does are of value. But the issue that I take, and I think that the reason it becomes a bit of a hitch point for me, is that there's more than just Jesus. And so many people identify, I mean, even as Michael was talking about the Christian atheists, I think that's a little narrow-minded to just say I follow the teachings of Christ, because there's so many other great moral, ethical, even theological thinkers out there that have really a good message with what they've brought to the table. I don't see the message that Jesus brought to be of any more value than the message that Dr. Jones and Bob and Joey and Ron and you guys are talking about today. It may have been inspired by him, but it's inspired by what was written about him and your understanding of that and your own life experiences. And you're probably reaching a bigger audience than this Jesus character ever did personally anyway. So it's
will you accept me into your life as your personal savior?
Yes, I will.
All right.
Now, right?
Repeat after me. No, I'm just kidding.
As long as he comes up and asks me to himself, I'm happy to do that.
But just because somebody says, I follow the teachings of Christ, your response of saying, I think that's narrow-minded, doesn't it assume that, for example, myself or Dr. Jones do not also respect and follow the teachings of many other good philosophers, people who sacrifice themselves for an ideal?
I don't think that it assumes it intrinsically, but it just
if you're
takes
wrong,
away from it a bit.
If you're wrong, it definitely does assume it.
Yeah, I read Thich Nhat Hanh. I read Eckhart Tolle. I'm not so fond of him, but I'm definitely interested in the thinking of a great number of people who struggle with issues of right, wrong, perception, love, and I find it a lot of it very, very, very useful.
There are a lot of Christians who attack the New Covenant group, and they attack us because we focus so much on Christianity and church, and we talk about that it really doesn't. It's such a broken system that it should go away, and they say, well, why are you focusing so much on church? That's true of mosques, synagogues, Muslims, except why are you picking on us so much? And I would, Greg, I know that you love the New Covenant group, but I would put the argument of saying, of accusing myself or Dr. Jones of being so narrowly minded in that same category of argument, because we exist in a culture that is full of a message about Jesus Christ that is sick and damaging to the psyche of the people who hear it. And this same thing doesn't exist, doesn't hold true for the message of Gandhi or Martin Luther King or any other such person who had a loving message that moves us forward. We're not so far removed from what they actually said as to interpret what they say to be so damaging as the words of Jesus Christ have been misinterpreted and refolded into our culture.
That's a very good point, and I will certainly grant it to you. But I guess the thing that I'm reaching at with this is the choice in self-identification. In saying I am a Christian is a very positive way to identify specifically with one ideological worldview. And instead of saying I as an atheist am happy to say I think that Christ or Jesus, the story, the character, the person, whoever it is, the book's about him, it was a pretty good message behind that, and that's okay. But I won't identify as a Christian just because I think that's a good story,
and I think
because
that's
there's
a
so
very
many
good
other
point.
ones out
But
there.
let me interrupt just for the sake of making a point, if I might. How many atheists claim to be a Darwinist?
I know some, but they mean it kind of jokingly as a
But isn't
not
Darwin, in a sense, a working premise in terms of the name?
In other words, Darwin represents more than just Darwin.
Exactly. I mean, isn't Darwin being used in a sense as an icon?
Yes.
Isn't that what Richard Dawkins is doing?
Yeah.
And so I could say I believe in evolution, or I believe in Darwin, I believe in the theory, yada, yada, yada. And we use metonymy all the time in language simply to make a point. I believe in Darwin, not actually the person, but what the term represents. True?
Yeah, usually I see it as a representation of
So,
believing in science, yeah.
I have no problem in saying I believe in Darwin in that sense of the word, and this is the way that language works. And so in the same category, since he did contribute and since so many things have been built in the name of Darwin and have buttressed so many different arguments, can't the same thing be stated concerning Christ? Why is it wrong for an atheist to say, just as much as I'm a Darwinist, I'm, a Christian?
Well,
seems-
I will.
I
will
tend to
make one
identify
singular argument
as
on
a
that one.
believer. I can't tell you last time I said that.
Yeah, I was
I'm
going to
a
say,
Christian.
when I say I'm a
Just
Christian,
runs into
I
trouble.
do use that term very loosely.
Oh, yeah,
and I'm aware that a lot of people misunderstand what I mean when I say that.
Yeah.
You know.
That was a bad word for me to say.
Yeah.
But I'm simply
I say
saying,
Christian.
I'm simply
Big
trying to
mouth.
say that I have no problem
loud
in
and
saying
proud.
that
You're OC.
that I
OC.
believe in Darwin, and I have no problem in saying I believe in Christ. I'm not simply saying about the individual, because I think that what Jesus was spinning or talking about was much larger than just his person. Would you agree with that, Greg?
I would, especially when you look at the cultural or the historical context of the time. That yes, it was a cultural movement, but I don't think that it was any more significant in what he was doing. And I'd even argue to a large extent that it was less significant than what, say, Gandhi or Martin Luther King did, in the way that they changed the cultural paradigm, the speed at which they did it, and the immediate benefit of that movement.
But
So-
when you look at all the different manuscript evidence, when you look at all of it, there is a significant paradigm change that took place in that particular lifetime, that is, in the lifetime of Christ. And so how can we say that that's just not that significant?
We
The
have
way
a,
I would look at it, I'm sorry.
Sorry, I just want to address something. We have, let me just speak for a moment to Burn the Skeptic. Hello, Burn the Skeptic. We're sorry you're having trouble with audio. Apparently, one of the microphones in the studio is so far away that it's causing feedback on the show. I hope that our sorry, I'm not back there. You know, if I was back there, it'd be all
It's
taken
just
care of.
falling apart without
It
you.
is. So,
Yeah.
our crew, I don't know if you're monitoring that audio, but feel free to physically and actively administer repairs, and to Burn the Skeptic. We do love you,
yes.
And apologize.
and we apologize.
We're
You know,
apologists.
by the way,
Michael,
I find it
specifically,
as an
I think it's
extremely
you who is saying it.
sophisticated thing when I can tell my students that that I'm a Brahist.
One,
Well, you don't already?
Oh, I do.
I think it's our
They
free
look at me like,
thinker.
what's
We
that?
need our
Sounds very
Ricky,
sophisticated.
can you
and
get
it is.
it might be me, yeah.
Ricky? Can you get Mr. Fulford a better stand to where the microphone could be closer to his mouth?
I will grant you that there is a significant benefit to self-identifying for something for a specific reason. I mean, I open every one of my shows with, "Hi, I'm Greg Bray, and I'm an atheist," and that is significant only because there's so many theists out there, and they dominate the culture so much, and it's frankly unique given that I'm an atheist on a network of this nature. I mean, being part of the New Covenant group is really the only place where an atheist comes together with so many other theists and has regular meetings and conversations, which is why I focus on that. But I'm more than an atheist and happily will identify as those things. So I see what you're saying with using the label Christian to nuance a point. But I think that it's generally more internalized than that. And it's I hope that the day comes around where I no longer have to use the term atheist, that I'm just Greg, and that's not such a significant cultural difference where people would go, great, you're an atheist.
So
That's apparently what it's like in much of Europe
So-
already. So
could you admit this? I believe in Darwin, and I also believe in Christ. My question is, do you believe in Darwin in the sense that I'm speaking?
yes, I'd imagine so.
Do you believe in Christ in the sense that I'm speaking?
I'd imagine so.
Okay.
Will you say the sinner's prayer in the sense that he's speaking?
Oh, come on, Joey.
You need to pray to Joey now. No, I'm joking.
That's my name.
We're wiggling in there.
Blow it up.
Uh,
I think Michael has a comment.
Yeah, Michael has a comment, but I wanted to make a statement. I had invited Cy Ten Bruggencate on this show tonight simply because
Tin Booger Cakes.
so many things have been stated that is on our YouTube comment section concerning our last show that was given to his arguments, and he complained personally that there were no people here to represent his position, that is philosophically, about his logic system. And so I made sure that I invited various people, including Cy, to the program tonight. And I had absolutely no takers, and so I wanted to make that just a point in the program. Michael, you had something to state.
Well, I was going to say that the way I view Christianity and Jesus is I see it as expounding on humanism, which the Greek humanism that developed around that time period a little earlier. And when you look at history, you can see that there used to be an idea of famous names of history. In other words, you would have people, you'd have history of names instead of history of circumstances. And now we're beginning to understand that the circumstances are more important than the person who was in the circumstances that arose. So, for instance, if Hitler that wasn't there in World War II, someone else would have taken his place. It was that situation. For me, when I look back and I see that what a lot of Christianity has done is spread this compassionate, humanistic message. They've not followed it a lot, but they've spread it. To me, the Christian or the idea of Jesus Christ is that kind of figure. There would have been someone else who would have filled that spot, even if the person who became who we know as Jesus Christ did not exist. Someone else would have pushed a message of accept thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others as you'd have done unto you. There would have been another figure spreading that kind of mythology. He might not have been Jewish. He may have been one of the other.
Do unto others as you would have them do unto you as mythology.
I think that's a wonderful point, and I think that needs to be given a great deal of attention. Now, I am what I would identify as a believer, but I have to be completely honest in recognizing that I have no real argument against that. I can't pretend in the least and be honest that isn't a real possibility. I mean, we say this even like about the Beatles. We were in a Great Depression, a funk after Kennedy's assassination. Music was kind of getting old hat and being churned, and people weren't really appreciating what Motown was trying to give us. And then along come the Beatles, and everything changed. But it was the right time. It would have been someone else if they weren't there. Who knows? But I think that Michael's making a great point there, and I think that even though I'm a believer, we have to be humble enough to recognize that that's not the kind of a thing one can say, aha, but I got you here because sorry. I think that's an excellent point. That
I do think it's a good point, but I don't see a lot of evidence to show one way or the other.
It's a viable, intelligible argument to offer that leaves room for saying, well, hey,
Well, I think that the best argument to support that, and I very much agree with what Michael's saying, but it's a cultural shift that needs to happen first, and I think that's really the significant factor. Dr. Jones mentioned the paradigm shift that happened around that time, and I think that realistically, this humanist or this humanist value system that Jesus helped bring to the table, I'm positive that he was not the first person historically to think like that, to have that kind of an understanding of the
But he
world.
never made the claim that he was.
Well, and I'm not arguing that specifically, but
He was simply the
I'm
most
sure that
successful.
this was going on for thousands of years beforehand, with
Time
people
was
saying,
right.
"Whoa, something's really messed up with this system, and it needs to change." But the culture just wasn't ready for it yet, so they were killed or thrown into obscurity, and nobody ever wrote about them. I mean, they were exiled, never gained any followers, and even look at Madeline Murray O'Hair, the founder of the American Atheists, was not nearly as successful at the time that she started everything, and even at the time that she was killed or disappeared, than a blogger can be now talking about atheism.
Right.
It's just the culture is far more ready to accept it and to embrace that kind of speech and ideology. There's trailblazers, to be sure, but there's also just a general cultural paradigm shift that opens the door waiting for somebody to step through it.
Right.
Well,
That's-
I'd say
that's a good
that-
point.
I'm sorry.
I can't accept. I can accept the some of the ideas that are being proposed by Mr. Fulford and Mr. Bray, but I can't accept that these things would happen were it not for human beings making the choice to put their shoulder into it. Yes, this life and this world is a huge barge that we're all in together. It can't be steered by one person, and so once a lot of people start putting their shoulders into it, it begins to turn. And so maybe that's already being said by the word cultural, but I just want to make sure that's brought out, that these aren't waves, that these aren't movements or changes in our culture that happen by themselves. They happen through the force of human beings.
Well,
Wouldn't you think that in the last 10 years that we've had, in the last 10 years, there are, I remember, like back in the 70s, anybody that I knew who seemed to have a viable personal belief in Jesus was involved in church. But I got to tell you that today, most of the people I know who seem to be spiritually pursuing and journeying are people who don't go to church, and they believe it. So I think we're finding that in the last 10 years, there's been an amazing movement of people in various circles, some that don't even know each other or haven't even been influenced by each other, people just exodusing the institution, and yet not in a way that has anything to do with abandoning faith at all.
Right.
And
I like to
who
word-
knows where this is headed?
The word disenfranchised comes to my mind because it reminds me of certain groups of people, for one reason or another, were actually ostracized. And I do feel that those that are experiencing this mass exodus right now out of church, they are being pushed in some degree. Some of them, obviously, I'm fed up, but some of them are actually forced out because they don't believe the tenets, the articles of faith, the whatever, and so they are being disenfranchised to that very group that drew them in and promised to love, accept, and take care of them for however long. And we have a new group of disenfranchised people.
Yeah. One thing that a lot of atheists will crow about is the numbers of non-religious that are being published by the Pew Society when they do their polling. And a lot of that is actually people who are probably still in some form religious. They just encounter something that I encountered when I was religious myself. And that was, if you have questions that are at all at odds with the main orthodoxy of whatever church you belong to, you're going to be kicked out. One thing I encountered is I was having a discussion. This was when I was back in martial arts. I was talking with my instructor, who was himself very deeply religious, as were other people. And that's not a problem. I mean, it's martial arts, so it doesn't play into it at all. But any kind of discussion, what I would run into is, oh, so you're an atheist? Flat out, no matter what I said. My thing was, well, actually, when you come down to it, the science doesn't really support the 6 days of creation. And if you read the book, you see there's two different accounts. I was still religious at the time myself. I just had a different view of how God did things at the time. And that was something where it ran into, well, you're an atheist if you don't believe exactly as we do, which is kind of the historical thing. I mean, that's what happened with Christians back in Rome. They were an atheist because they didn't worship any of the other gods, so they became atheists. And to Greg's point, he was saying he wasn't familiar with anybody else spreading the same kind of message as Jesus. The Chinese had a form of humanism dating back much, much earlier than Christianity or what came developed in the classical Greek world. And humanism, and what we would recognize as humanism, pretty much develops in any culture that has a high population density at some point
Yes.
or another.
Yeah, makes sense.
And the main thing when you are talking about with Jesus Christ is one, the Roman Empire kind of took it over, which helped spread it, and the Roman Empire had a far reach at the time. And the area that it was prevalent in is now what we know as the developed world. Give it another century or two, and it may reverse. We may have Hinduism spread as much as Christianity has. It's really, from kind of a historical perspective, hasn't been that long. It's just the tools of spreading information have changed so much, and how easy it is to spread has changed so much.
Exactly.
You think that Hinduism can have the same prominence in 100 years as Christianity does today?
Well, I gave it as an example, but I will say this as a.
I mean, any religion.
Oh, yeah.
And it's an interesting discussion. I'm not I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but Christianity has taken 2,000 years to get where it is. Do you really think that a religion could take, or an ideal could take its place in even close to its prominence as Christianity or the Muslim faith in 100 years?
Well, I want to caveat everything I'm saying as I'm a hobbyist. So there are people who are much more intelligent and make a better answer. So
pay attention, Si.
I'm making this.
Well.
So when I want to caveat that,
We
part of the
would have
reason
used
why
religions. instead of all
Chris-
religions for that fact.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. No,
Sorry.
I thought you would, but
She wasn't paying attention. Can you repeat what you said?
I'm good.
Okay.
oh, okay. No, if you got something, that's fine. I'm blathering. I don't care.
No, please say what you were saying.
But what I was going to say is that when it comes to Christianity, they had a couple advantages. One, it was enforced by an empire, and then another empire, and then another empire, depending on which ones you want to pick out. So they had that advantage. The other advantage is that the people who were pushing Christianity had the only control of information for a very long time. Now with the internet, now with global communication, books are getting easier and easier to publish. I have a Nook, so e-publishing is even easier than ever before. I think it really is the point where we can make things where religion can come to prominence, or an idea of any kind could come to prominence, much shorter than what it could before. I mean, look at ideas. Evolution took several decades to be commonly accepted in the scientific society. Then look how quickly the continental drift theory came to be accepted in by the scientific community within a short time, because of textbooks being able to be published, because of people being able to compare notes. And this was back before the internet came about.
I asked that question because Dr. Jones and myself have a small lifelong wager going. I don't think that the ideals of the church can I think it'll take a long time to change that in this culture. Dr. Jones thinks that we can do it within this lifetime.
Well, my question for you on that, Joey, is what do you mean by the church? Are we talking about the orthodox institutions of the church or the general population? I mean, using sort of size definition of the bride of Christ in that, because I think that the orthodoxies by definition are going to remain orthodox. They're just going to become fringe groups.
Yeah,
like
certainly,
certainly.
Dr. Jones and myself are both talking about the ideals of the majority.
Well, I don't think the Catholic Church itself is going to change anytime soon. I might be wrong. There's a lot of conflicting information on this new.
But what about the people within that organization?
Well, the people within that organization, it depends. If you mean
they already have.
Well, yeah, the people, like here in the U.S., one of the biggest things about Catholicism is, right now, one of the issues, the greatest sin facing the world, according to the last Pope, was homosexuality, and them being allowed to marry.
Pedophilia.
And then the other issue would be contraception. Most Catholics in the U.S. have no problem with the homosexual marriage, and most of them use contraception. So what we'll see is...
Do they have anything to say about pedophilia?
I'm sure a lot of them don't like it.
Okay.
The Catholic
Especially
Church...
the altar boys.
The Catholic Church hasn't really said that much, unfortunately.
It said not nearly as much as it should have.
Well, what they've said...
Amen.
What they've said has been horribly... I can't think of a polite word to say it.
Well, then do what your mother taught
I think
you.
what they haven't said is even more damaging.
Yes.
The fact
Well,
that
actually,
they haven't
if you-
said
well,
things
if
to
you-
say, "Oh, the police."
Yeah.
But
Well,
that's just me.
well, it's not even that. It's
Yes.
like you have bishops who are associated with the Catholic Church. What do they say? Oh, it was the children's fault. They seduced me.
Oh, let me get
Or-
that out of here.
Or that apology where they claimed that a lot of those abuses happened, in the defense of truth. And so, they want a little bit of leeway with some of the great offenses they've created over the years. I think that the internet was largely responsible for why the exodus from church has been happening by people who have remained believers. I think the fact that they can connect and talk to each other, it gives them the community and the connection that they have. I find it greatly meaningful to be connected to people on the internet, and in many ways, it has taken the place that I used to, attend church. I attended church for a number of years, even though I was no longer a believer in it as an institution, because I got to meet with people that I loved, that I enjoyed, and I was a part of it because it was part of my socializing, and it was meaningful for me to do it. But when I found that I could, venture out in other ways and connect with people and talk and be in dialogue where there was even greater intellectual honesty and freedom, well, hey, then I did that. And I think that, so I wouldn't be surprised if, we have no idea where the internet is going to head yet. I wouldn't be surprised if we could be at that point where, like Michael was talking about, maybe Jesus here at just the right time. Who knows? We could find in the next 5 years something might just explode, and who knows? We might go through a period of great humanistic, agnostic or atheistic, real championing of the value of being human, and on a spiritual level, in a sense, that who knows? Christianity, if it comes back at that time, might actually have more embraced that view and now be able to more clearly see that in the text. I think a lot of Christianity is hampered by the fact that most people who study it can't get away from the traditions as they study it. True. And they get swallowed back up into it. Right. And that could change. And if it does, I think that Christianity could actually go through a huge evolution to come out, be a very radically different faith in, say, 100 years than it is today.
Bob, you exploded. I mean, exploded on Greg's show. That was wonderful.
It was something he ate.
It was something that he ate. Yeah. Now, you guys were talking about penal substitution. You were talking about Yahwistic theology, etc. I want you to explode again. You gave us some powerful sound bites. That will be edited out, and will
yes,
become
Bob,
a part
because we
of
all know that you can
YouTube.
Replicate the passion that you felt in that spur of the moment.
I hope so.
Go
for it, Bob. Do something.
When I say things like that, it's just for the moment, and I'm just responding, and I don't even really remember all the things that Greg and I talked about. I'm 61. I've got Alzheimer's. But I thought I loved Greg's show there. I thought it was great, the things we were talking about, and the ability to take a look at some of the notions that surround the Easter season, and the problems of that theology. So in many ways, as a person who is a believer, maybe I could even for a moment use the word Christian. For a person who's a Christian, to me, one of the things that I'm most bothered by is Christianity.
I can understand that.
Right. I used to always tell my father-in-law, and today is his birthday, and we sure missed him today on his birthday. I always would tell him, and we'd minister in churches together, and I would say, Papa, if it wasn't for the people, I would sure love coming to church. And, you know, the way we say it in the South, you know, I are one. And then you have to take a good look at yourself. And when Bob was talking about this, how much he enjoys being around people in general, but then those that do believe in Christ and whatnot, I thought, you know, that's exactly, to me, how it was meant to be, a grassroots type of, you know, movement. Nothing like what we have now with the, you know, the spires and cathedrals and all this. And I would think he would be so ashamed of how we took it and made it very commercial. And so
the thought police, yeah.
Right, absolutely.
You know, one thing that has always stayed true for me in my life in church and my journey out of it is I've always believed that church, whatever you want to call, let's just call it church for a moment. That church, one of the main purposes of church was to learn to get along with people, to love people, to learn patience, to accept them, etc. And that hasn't changed. I still believe that today about the building that we have here, the studio, the people that are here. I just think that it becomes a lot easier when we all accept that this isn't a church, because then it becomes, when it's more about the discussion and not everybody arguing about you know, what this one infallible book says, it becomes a lot easier to get along with people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Very good. And you know what? It all seems to boil down to what some, like Cy, would call the ultimate authority, and he uses Scripture as his. And to me, I thought, and I was in the audience that night, and I thought then and there, you have such a failed argument because there are so many inconsistencies and variances and everything in your ultimate authority. That's like having, I don't want to be insensitive, but
he won't accept that.
Well, I
Because
do
unlike-
understand that,
unlike
but just
Mr.
because he doesn't accept it doesn't make it not so true.
Unlike Mr. Michael Fulford over here, he is not a hobbyist.
But that's like having a 3-year-old as your ultimate authority. You know, there are tons of mistakes, doesn't understand the language. I mean,
Are you talking about my house?
yes.
Well, what I'd say,
I want to make a point too on the ultimate. The use of the word ultimate it's thrown around a lot in fundamentalist circles and even in a lot of apologetics.
True.
Well, there's no ultimate meaning to life. Who's your ultimate authority? And I guess it's begging the question to that extent. I saw even in one of my conversations on Facebook earlier, or a group, somebody was saying, what is that atheism makes it devoid of ultimate meaning in life? And realistically, I don't care whether there's an ultimate meaning. My perception is where my meaning comes from. And when I'm gone, I won't be around to lament the loss of that meaning. So ultimate is my own perception to my own perception. I am my own ultimate authority on what I see, know, and think. And once I'm gone, there will be no more me to be concerned about why my authority is gone. It's silly to think that there needs to be an ultimate authority or an ultimate truth in that respect.
yeah,
It's a laziness. It's actually an abdication of one's responsibility to humbly approach life and realize that as inept as I may be, as unqualified as I may be, these are my choices, my endorsements, my conclusions, and I need to own them as mine. Yeah. And so I find that concept
means
of
it's going to be
ultimate
a bumpy
authority.
ride.
Yeah, I have a fellow on a forum made a post that I think represents it best. And his view on religion was that when you're born with an empty canvas. You can do whatever you want. You can even sculpt if you'd rather not paint. But you can do whatever you want with your life. And your meaning is whatever you create. You are given an endless amount of tools with which to create. But what religion, in the form that at least Cy would propose, what it does is says, no, you have to have this ultimate authority. If you don't have this, whatever you may do is worthless. And yeah, in 100 years, I'm going to be dead. Probably everybody I know will be dead, unless there's some wonderful medical technology that changes. That'd be cool, but, good chance I'll probably be dead in 100 years one way or another. That doesn't bother me. Well, it does kind of, because I'd like to be there when we finally reach another star or something like that.
All right,
But
you're
you have
nosy.
to-
Let's be honest. We all are.
Yeah.
We want to see what's happening.
But, that's the same way. I have to kind of, okay, this is where I am. If I want to be there when we set foot on another star, what can I do to get there? What can I do to help benefit that? If my thing is to create a community where atheists and theists can kind of
Get together and build
get together and talk.
spaceships. Totally agree. I totally agree.
Now, Joey,
Spaceship Jesus, awesome. We'll do that.
Joey, you had the wonderful experience of talking with Cy in the back. Can you tell us how that conversation went briefly?
It was very traumatic
For Cy or you?
for me.
I
Yes.
tried to interrupt it actually and shake his hand, and he refused to shake my hand and hug my neck. But would you tell your story, please?
I don't know that I can. I can't remember it word for word. I just know that I went back there to. I went back there to apologize. I was telling my wife the other day because she confronted one of her friends about something that she didn't feel. Her friend and her worked together in certain things, and she felt like her friend was dropping the ball, and she confronted her, and then she told me she felt bad, and I said, well, honey, I said, I always second guess myself when I confront somebody, but I'm proud that you had the courage to confront them anyways, and I certainly second guessed myself when I confronted Cy because I didn't. He was a guest in our studio, and I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to upset him, but I did what I felt was necessary, and so I went back just to apologize and make sure that he was okay. And little did I know that an ambush was awaiting me, and he began to use the same argument on me that he was using on the very atheist that I was trying to defend when I asked him to move on, and my beloved brother in arms, Greg Bray, and. He's being sarcastic. He doesn't mean it. He
I
doesn't
thought
mean
he was being genuine.
No, he's being sarcastic. So, anyways, I mean, we know the argument that Cy uses, and he's convinced that he's right, and he has videos of us that his crew promised that we would get, and he has not given to us, and I'm terrified that he's going to edit this into something crazy that looks like I said something that I didn't say. But
I'm gonna start laughing if you did.
But he told his friends that we would be ashamed when we saw it, and no wonder we didn't want him to release it. But I never said that I didn't want him to. I did say, actually I did. I did say I didn't want him to release it after I found out that he wasn't going to give it to us, and that they were going to edit it, because I'm very concerned about somebody who's so convinced that they're right about something that's so foolish, taking an argument that a crazy argument that he's trying to have with somebody who's going to be honest and gentle with him and say, yeah, I could be wrong. What rational person wouldn't say they could be wrong? And I'm afraid he's going to edit that into something that it's not. But I did go back and watch some of the confrontations that he had with other people, like P.Z. Myers. He had one of our recent guests. He cornered him at an atheist festival. We'll just I like to. I don't think they call it festivals.
I think it was a Reason rally, probably.
Let's call it a reason. Can we start calling them Reason festivals? But anyways, I think that'd be better.
The feasts of the Reasonus Festivus, is that? we need to start giving them very.
It just sounds more joyful. But anyways, he cornered P.Z. Myers there, and I didn't think, I was happy with the way that he represented P.Z. Myers, and so as long as the conversation is represented faithfully as it happened, I'm perfectly happy. I'm not ashamed of what happened back there, it just took me off guard. I wasn't expecting to have a fight on my hands.
Well, just give us a little example of what's to come. Give us a piece of dialogue between you and Cy.
Oh, wait, let's see. Well, he started out by asking me if I was a Christian, and I told him yes. And I was aware the moment I said that in his eyes I would probably look like I was just disguising as a Christian. But I do use that term very loosely. I do love the person Jesus who I have read about as I understand him, and I do very much believe in the message that he taught. As I view it, and I believe that it was a message of love and acceptance, and so as somebody who those ideals are very important to, I call myself a Christian, and I think I have that right, and I don't think that Cy has the right to take that from me.
Absolutely.
So I told him that I was, and so he began to talk to me about why he was saying those things to Greg, why he was just cutting him off. And honestly, I really didn't have nearly as much of a problem with Cy's argument as much as he was basically telling Greg to shut up over and over and over again. I had a big problem with that.
It's more of the style than the argument itself, and he actually uses the style as part of his leverage, thinking that he is justified in that style by the argument.
That's why I'm sorry.
So the moment
I
that
can't
he
imagine what you got to make this up on the cuff if you're going to deal with somebody like that, because
But you can't really rationally deal with somebody who is just repeatedly telling you to shut up, and that is really the biggest flaw of the argument is how it was represented by him, I think.
Oh yes. Yes.
Well, that's why
because
I was saying
when
in
you're
the
telling
last show,
somebody, well, you've already admitted that you don't know anything, therefore you can't speak. You've already admitted that you don't know anything, therefore you have no value in this conversation. You've already said you don't know anything. You've already said you don't know anything. You've already admitted you don't know anything, so just be quiet. There really isn't a good answer to that, and maybe he appears to some people as having one, but the New Covenant group is not about conversational victory.
No.
We're not. I didn't go back there to defeat him. I went back there to try and salvage what I hope would be left of a friendship.
Yeah.
And the moment he realized that I was in his eyes an atheist in disguise, espionage, he just began to basically tell me to shut up over and over again. Is that true? Is that true? Is everything I said, is that true? Is that true? Well, I had already admitted that I could be wrong. So, I don't think it's, I think it's very disingenuous to throw an honest person's words back in their face over and over and over again.
Right. He truly did not want a conversation with you.
Right.
To me, that's
No,
what
he
it does
didn't.
right
No.
away. He's negating anything that you've got to say. He doesn't want anyone to talk. He wants to the talk, and he wants to hear what he wants to hear. And if he doesn't, then you're discounted. And I think
Right.
Bob brought this up last week. He dismisses most of the panel right from the get-go, and that's not what we're about. We're about bringing everybody
Yeah.
to the table of discussion.
And
Whether
was,
I think
he
you
was
are an
a
idiot,
guest here
you need
in
to
this
speak
in this studio,
Right.
and as a guest, it was up to us to treat him with respect,
Right.
and kindness, but it was also up to him to be a good guest, and I felt that there were times when he was not being a very good guest, I think it's okay for me to say that, because it's the reason why I made
Let me
this
see if I
decision.
can defend Cy.
Can we turn his mic down? Can we just turn him down?
It may sound
There's Greg's ear.
foolish, that is, for me to defend him, but I really think that he has a heart for winning people to Jesus. In listening to various videos, he made one comment, and this is not verbatim, but he said that the reason that he uses this kind of technique and argument is to, number one, shut the mouths of atheists and those people who don't believe, so then he can present the gospel. And so his his approach is not to listen. It's very much a one-way street.
That's what I was saying
And
last
so
episode, yeah.
His intention is, I don't want to listen because you're on your way to hell. I'm here to warn you. I'm the messenger. I'm the guy that will save you. That is, Christ will save you if you can just listen to my message. And so in his mind, he's convinced that he's doing you some good. He's convinced that he, in a sense, is stopping you from running off of the cliff. And so if you will listen to him, that's his form of love, because that was the question that he posed me when I tried to get him to shake my hand. I was just simply saying, I appreciate you being on the show, yada, yada, yada. Said, I'd like to shake your hand. He refused to do so until he went through a big spill with his rhetoric, and then he finally shook my hand and said, well, hug my neck, I love you. And he wouldn't do that. And he just rebuked me, told me to repent. I was going to hell. And I said, repent is such a stupid word.
We have a question
Yeah.
from somebody in the viewing audience here. It's Burn the Skeptic again. How should we as a society treat the soapbox preaching size of the world?
Ignore them.
Are we doing a disservice by spending this much time even talking about the argument here? Is it better to just say it's silly, it's ridiculous?
We can discuss the argument.
And they're rude.
I don't think it's beneficial for for us to have this discussion, but I think there are lots of people who will be badgered by this argument.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there are lots of evangelicals who are proud of this movement. This is why I'm trying to defend Cy. I don't believe in what he's doing, but I'm just saying that in his mind he feels as if he is saving people from hell itself. And this is the way that most people of that mindset feel. And so they have to have an argument that's compelling, and and they don't mind subjugating you. If they can get you into heaven, they have saved your life. And so they think like that. And so it's very abusive. I think that his argument is abusive, and I don't think that anyone needs to go through that kind of rhetoric. But unfortunately, people will. I mean, it's becoming very, very popular. And it's similar to Ray Comfort and
Banana Man.
Yeah.
I mean, I really don't think it's wise to ignore it personally.
Well, I don't mean ignore the argument. I think it's important to kind of examine an argument, find out why it's flawed. I do think it's important to ignore the people who are espousing the argument.
Well, in
the
a
more
sense,
press you give them, the more they can hold up and say, here, there. It's like with Dawkins, how he won't hold a debate with certain classes of people or certain types of theists, is because it gives them credentials. It makes them show like they have a point.
Yeah.
And I can discuss creationism without ever having to bring in Ray Comfort or Kent Hovind or Ken Ham.
So let me just make an extreme analogy here to make a point. Saying that we should ignore Cy is, in my mind, a little bit like walking down the street and seeing somebody get beat up and saying, well, the best way to deal with that bully is just to ignore him. I think that Cy's argument is compelling to a lot of people. And it isn't a rational argument. Just because something is compelling to somebody doesn't mean that it's true or rational. And the technique of both having a clever sounding argument and using bully tone and tactic, telling people to be quiet, and making sure that your voice is the only one heard. That is a bully tactic.
Right, it's very abusive.
And I think that if it was just me he was affecting, I think ignoring is a great solution.
Well, when I say ignoring, for my example, what I'd be doing is you're talking about being on the street and witnessing this. I would say that by my example, what I'm saying is putting somebody in a martial arts class or a self-defense class so that they won't get bullied. And that would be my way of putting it. Is not, if someone is being bullied, having the tools to be able to defend that person who's being bullied.
Right. But in a martial arts class, you have somebody who plays the opponent, so that you can teach them the proper ways to move, etc.
Which would be a discussion on the argument. From my perspective, that's because Dr. Jones and others will play the devil's advocate, or we'll have somebody on the show, and that's in a controlled setting where we can have a friendly discussion about the argument, about the topic, or whatever. But at the same time, there's no risk of, well, I can make a fool of myself, but at the same time, when I'm making a fool of myself, other people are able to watch and say, okay, here's where he made a fool of himself, and I can, if this comes up, I can keep that in mind
Right.
and not make that same mistake.
Yeah, I can agree with what you're saying. in
Well,
the sense that
I'm
you mean it.
thinking that, ignore it. I would tell the person to distance yourself as far away as possible. And the reason I say that, and it may sound a little, narrow-minded, but if in fact the person stayed, listened, and put up with the abuse or whatever you want to call it, what is at the end of that rainbow, for lack of a better word? It's a pot of crap. I mean, it's not anything they need. It's a waste of time to hear the end of it. I mean, so the end does not justify any part of staying there.
Hey, nobody
Go.
touches me,
Twist
Lucky
off.
Charms.
Well, there's two ways there's two benefits I could say to holding that discussion. One is that you're getting experience, like on a video game. But, you get experience, and you are dealing with somebody who is offensive, who is holding a poor argument, and you're able to follow that argument. The other would be, this would be the main time I would engage with somebody like that, would be if there is an audience. Because you're not going to convince the person holding the debate. Maybe afterwards they'll come up to you and you can talk, but while you're holding a debate, the entire point of the debate is not to convince the person you're arguing with. It's to convince the people who are watching or who are enjoying the conversation. And if you try to do anything else, if you're trying to convince the person, that's not going to work. And that's where a one-on-one confrontation might be beneficial, but at the same time, I'd prefer to have something like this where we can discuss the argument, not necessarily the person who's holding the argument, and show why it's flawed or some objections they may raise, because I follow apologetics blogs as well, so I know there are some things that they'll say, no, this
Right.
is not a valid argument because we have this view on it, or you're not representing our view correctly, or whatever else.
But I think you're answering. Just going back to the original question, I think you're answering a question that is not exactly the question that was asked. The question you're answering is, how should we deal with Cy Bruggencate?
Mhm.
Whereas the question that was asked was, how should we deal with Cy Bruggencate's argument? I believe. Is that not
Are
true?
you talking about the one Greg just asked?
The question that was
Yes,
Or
it's
yeah.
specific. Well,
Bully-
it's the soapboxing
Mhm.
side 10 Bruggencates
Yeah,
of the world.
Well, I think we should ignore the people on the soapbox.
oh, so the people themselves.
The
Okay,
people
so I was
themselves.
the one who
See,
misunderstood.
in a way, I would kind of look at it as if you're trying to address the person, you're almost making an ad hominem attack on the person.
Okay. Yes.
If you're
I
addressing the
agree.
argument, then you can just address the argument without having to say anything in regards to the person holding
Yes,
it.
I agree
One,
with that.
one thing that I will say about that particular show when he was here in the studio is that he proved beyond a shadow of a doubt why church is harmful.
Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
It worked
did
well for
he
that,
did a
nuancing
great
that
job. I mean, we didn't have to make the argument. He did it by himself.
Well, I don't know if he was necessarily, I'm not sure about the evangelical church or what his position might be in it. I can say that it definitely shows that fundamentalism is bad.
Sure.
That would definitely be, and that would be anything. Fundamental atheism. Many times if people ask me, that's why I identify as a skeptic.
But
I have doubts.
see, our argument here is not that all the people in church are bad people.
Yeah.
Our argument.
That's my argument.
Is that can you turn Greg down, please? What we're saying is that there are premises and concepts within the belief system of church that are damaging, that are really damaging to people's minds, to their spirits, and I think that what Dr. Jones is saying is that Cy really represented that. He really nuanced that system of belief.
Well, I could say, just to kind of play the devil's advocate here a little bit in a way, you can say the same about nationalism. You can say the same about
Sure.
many
Absolutely.
different
Absolutely.
things.
Yeah.
And nationalism is
Yes.
one I run into
Yeah,
a
I
lot.
agree.
So it's
The-
not
the
necessarily.
degree to which-
That's why I was saying fundamentalism instead of the church, because the church recognizes a certain entity, when really it's that type of thought. It's that fundamentalist thought.
Right.
And I can see ways that could be helpful. I mean, there's a lot of things that come about because somebody held to a certain viewpoint and never wavered from it. But it's human, so there's a good way of expressing it and a poor way of expressing it, and that kind of fundamentalism is definitely a problem.
Yeah,
My-
we saw a
Michael's-
great contrast of, if I may, we saw a great contrast of the fundamentalist position from one session of the place to the next. We had Cy on, and then we had, tell me his name again. Remind me, the gentleman Bart.
Oh, Bart Larson.
Bart
Yes.
Larson. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
Both of them represented a fundamental viewpoint of the Bible as infallible, the existence of hell, the potential of people going there, a loving God whose love was unconditional, and yet he would send his children there to suffer forever. But Bart did not. He was the antithesis of a bully.
That's true,
That
but
is true.
but one of the things that I did have a conversation after the show with him, and he did state that the question that I asked him about a person who raped a young woman and paying the 50 shekels to the young lady's father, when I asked him that question, it was very difficult for him to deal with at first. After he thought about it for a few days and we talked, he said, I really think that would be the just thing to do.
Okay, but I'm aware that he very much represents that the philosophies of the Old Testament,
Right.
etc. So my point is not that a lot of things that he believes aren't terrible. They certainly are, but that he represents them more in a mode of dialogue.
Oh yes, he's
Yeah.
a very respectful person. Yeah.
I'd say he's a Methodist. He's a Methodist, right? Methodist minister.
I
He-
can't
he's a.
think of it now.
I don't know whether he's a Methodist or not. He's
I think
hospice chaplain.
Yeah.
I think he's all over the place when it
I
comes
think
to-
he mentioned that he was a Methodist, and I was going to say some of the better ministers I've met have also been Methodist. There's a fellow, I can't remember his name at the moment, who's active, but certainly someone I could sit down and have a chat with and have no problem with it. And then one of my personal heroes, Fred Rogers, was himself a Methodist minister, and you would never know that from any of his programming or any of his public talks he gave.
Now, Michael, you made a comment a while ago about Richard Dawkins and turning down various debates with people because he didn't want to give them maybe credentials in a sense. Now, he has turned down a debate over and over again with someone who is not a no-name or an uneducated person, and that would be William Lane Craig. What is your opinion about him turning William Lane Craig down?
I've heard a lot of people's statements about what they think about that. Either he's a coward or other opinions. Personally, I can understand William Lane Craig has a argument that's sort of like size, and I can see him wanting to turn that down. He also made the statement that anybody who would justify the Amalekite, am I saying that name correctly?
You can
Amalekites.
pronounce that various ways. I mean,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I know, but I'm just wanted to make sure. I'm from the South, so I might say words wrong.
that's fine.
Let
But,
me jump in here for just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, we're getting a lot of reports of trouble with our connection, loss
Yes.
of connection,
I've been getting
etc. So we're going to do something just very casual here. I'm going to ask Matt back there in just a moment to reset our feed. We will go off for just a moment, and then we will come back. It will just take a few seconds, and perhaps it'll help with the connection issues that you're all having. And if we don't come back for you, just refresh the page, refresh your browser, and we should come right back.
My wife has been cut off several times. She'd sometimes come back on 30 seconds, have to refresh again. Yeah.
Okay, so Matt, I'm going to ask you to do that right now. Just cut it off, turn it back on. We'll be right back.
It's probably my Murphyonic field.
You don't even have to put music up. Just reset it.